There are plenty of music fans who would treasure almost anything that ever passed through the hands of George Harrison. Even decades after his passing, recordings, demos, and unreleased fragments tied to the former The Beatles guitarist still generate enormous fascination among listeners eager to glimpse more of his creative world. Part of that fascination comes from the almost mythical status that surrounded every member of the band. Figures like John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Harrison, and Ringo Starr often seemed larger than life, as if they existed somewhere beyond ordinary celebrity. For many fans, simply meeting one of them would have been enough to leave them speechless. But Harrison himself never entirely embraced that level of attention. While he was willing to share pieces of his life and beliefs through his music, he also believed that some parts of his creative process were deeply personal. Certain songs, especially early demos and unfinished ideas, were never meant for the public to examine closely. That attitude fit Harrison's personality from the very beginning of his career. Even during the height of Beatlemania, he rarely sought the spotlight. As the band's lead guitarist, he focused on strengthening the music rather than commanding the stage. While Lennon and McCartney naturally gravitated toward the center of attention, Harrison often preferred standing slightly behind them, shaping the sound rather than dominating it. This quiet nature made moments like the concert for Bangladesh in 1971 somewhat uncomfortable for him. Organizing and hosting a massive charity concert meant stepping forward as a public leader, something he never particularly enjoyed. Yet the cause mattered more than his own discomfort, and he accepted the role because he believed the music could make a real difference. When listeners explore Harrison's solo catalog, though, it becomes clear that he was anything but guarded when expressing his inner thoughts through finished songs. His monumental 1970 album All Things Must Pass reveals enormous emotional and spiritual depth. Across its sprawling track list, Harrison opened up about his frustrations, his search for meaning, and his growing interest in spirituality. Some listeners found the album's spiritual themes a little heavy-handed at times, but Harrison never intended to preach or convert anyone. His goal was simply to encourage people to think beyond everyday concerns and develop some connection to a higher power, whatever form that might take for them. At the same time, the album also reflected the difficult emotional period that followed the breakup of the Beatles. Songs like Wah Wah carried hints of frustration and tension from those final years with the band, including moments where Harrison appeared to vent his feelings toward McCartney. Still, the album balanced those sharper edges with more contemplative tracks placed later in the sequence. While the uplifting single My Sweet Lord became one of Harrison's biggest hits, deeper cuts like Beware of Darkness explored more mystical ideas. The song warns listeners about the hidden dangers of the world, ego, illusion, and negativity that can quietly cloud a person's sense of truth. Yet Harrison wasn't trying to present complicated philosophy. His message was actually quite simple. Drawing from the Hindu concept of Maya, he believed much of the world's distraction and conflict came from illusions that people mistakenly accepted as reality. By looking beyond those illusions, he felt individuals could move closer to a genuine relationship with the divine. Ironically, the song that carried this message also became part of the issue Harrison struggled with most, the circulation of private demo recordings. At one point, an early version of the track surfaced publicly without his approval, leaving him frustrated that something he never intended to release had suddenly become a collectible artifact for fans. Harrison later expressed his discomfort with the situation, explaining that he hadn't even realized the demo had been recorded at the time. When it eventually appeared on a bootleg, he found it strange that people were treating what he considered a rough, private recording as an official piece of music. His reaction revealed something important about Harrison's values. Unlike many artists, he was never particularly interested in the business side of the industry. Songs like Taxman had already shown his skepticism towards systems built around money and greed, and the idea of unreleased material being circulated purely for profit didn't sit well with him. That discomfort with the commercial machinery of music partly explains why Harrison occasionally stepped away from the industry altogether. During parts of the 1980s, he took long breaks from recording, before eventually returning with renewed enthusiasm on albums like Cloud 9. In the end, Harrison had no problem sharing his music with listeners who genuinely connected with it. What bothered him was when that music was treated purely as a commodity. For him, songwriting was never just about producing records. It was a personal expression of his beliefs, experiences, and evolving spiritual outlook. And when people began digging too deeply into the private corners of that creative process, Harrison felt that an important boundary had been crossed. Some songs were meant to be shared with the world, but others, at least in his mind, were never meant to leave the room where they were first written.